Something you may have noticed in the previous scene is that the crime scene investigative team consisted of only men. Forensic science was a male-dominated field until the early 20th century. The first woman to become an officer became an officer in 1910. A few things to keep note of in the upcoming scenes are the general crime scene protocol and also the use of gloves, or lack thereof.
Hello there. In our previous scene, you might have noticed the investigators using trigonometry and protractors to analyze the bloodstains. They did this in conjunction with strings to help trace back to a point of origin. Now this is great as an approximation, but it neglects the fact that blood, when it falls to the ground, is actually not the same size or shape as the initial blood stain. It actually becomes a bit larger and spreads out and becomes elliptical in shape. So using SOHCAHTOA is great, but only as an approximation.
So as you could see in the previous scene, they used methods of origin reconstruction that were less than ideal. They used strings to create a single point of convergence. This may trace the origin further back than it actually was, which can misconstrue the size of the weapon or the offender, because impacts are never just a point, which can create a false sense of exactness. The size and the shape of the locus of origin points may provide information about the size and the shape of the weapon, but not necessarily.
You may have noticed that women have been introduced to the crime scene. We've now moved on to today's crime scene protocol and bloodstain analysis. Approximately 75% of forensic science students today are women. You may have also noticed that the women in the video were wearing gloves. This is part of today's standard protocol in a crime scene. Other policies include taping off the area, proper collection of evidence, and also not disrupting the crime scene so as not to compromise the evidence.
It's better to approximate. As you saw in the previous scene, people today still use string method, and that's okay, but it's better to approximate. As you saw in this clip, the investigators were creating an area of convergence rather than a point of convergence. An area of convergence is determined by the direction of travel of several blood spatters, which can be approximated using convergence points and impact angles.
In the clip we just watched, you can see that it's best to use a combination of techniques that would otherwise be insufficient on their own. In this scene, we showed the blockage pattern. This involves trying to reconstruct how an impact event occurred by using different objects that may produce similar bloodstains, albeit garden tools are an unusual method.
The first hair sample for drug analysis was taken in 1858. The presence of arsenic was found 11 years after the body was buried. However, hair sampling, even for drug analysis, was not considered to be a valid source of evidence until around the 1980s. Hair samples are still not an effective way to identify somebody, but they are quite effective in drug analysis and in knowing drug history.
Today, a lot of computer software is used, especially in the laboratory setting, to do these methodologies.
So some of the methods we've talked about today, especially when used in conjunction with each other, are a great way to approach crime scene analysis. But it should be noted that when you use these kind of methods, it introduces variability and error. So use with caution.
As you can see, these techniques have been refined over time, and there's still a lot of room for improvement.
Yep.
Keep a protractor handy.